the Biden administration agenda may not at all be to Europe's liking. It wants to exacerbate its tensions with Russia. The moment that happens, Europe is the one that's going to pay a price for it. Biden administration will almost certainly get itself involved in Ukraine, which will only, again, antagonize Russia. It's very hostile to the Nord Stream natural gas project, which again will harm particularly German interests. And as far as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, I think the Biden administration is going to leave that one alone for a long time. They don't want to start antagonizing the Israel lobby in the United States. So if they think that there's going to be any real change from Trump as far as the JCPOA is concerned, they've got another thing coming.
Thank you, George. And Tony, I'd like to welcome you to the program now. Now, Tony, Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, I mean, we know they both kind of, I mean, well, I don't want to jump to, I mean, it's kind of evident that they hated Donald Trump. So, I mean, they could, instead of showing that they're static, that he's leaving, they're, I don't know, they're more tepid when it comes to incoming Joe Biden, it seems. Why?
Well, I think they certainly feel that they've got more shared values, as this word that they use, with Biden, a new Biden administration than they did with Trump. And those shared values really are the same oligarchy behind the scenes, the rich and powerful, the banksters that are the deep state, both in Europe and in the United States. That's their shared values, is that they're basically in the same clique. Donald Trump, for all his faults, and he did have many, many, many faults, at least when he got up onto a podium, onto a stage, you knew that it was Donald Trump's words you were getting. With Joe Biden, he basically works on teleprompters and scripts. And if you want a Hollywood version of democracy, then Biden is the guy. You know, he's going to be the one that does that. I'm not so sure if George is right about the JCPOA. I mean, it's quite clear that there was, quite a lot of campaigning around the JCPOA. Biden saying he was all for restoring it in the run-up to the election. In the actual election period itself, around sort of August, September, October, November, not a lot of mention of it. But if you go back to July last year, Biden was saying he wants to renew the Arms Control Treaty, the JCPOA. This is there on the record. And he said if Iran returns to compliance, we will rejoin the JCPOA. That's what he said. Now, he may not mean it. And, of course, he's got a little get-out clause in there, which is if Iran returns to compliance. And the Americans might decide they want to fiddle around with that and make silly, pedantic points about it. But I think, the ball is now in Iran's court, because if Iran wants to recomply, go back, then they will have done exactly what Biden said last year, and the ball will be back in the Americans' court saying, well, we are now back in compliance, sign on the dotted line, Joe. But the trouble is, since he's actually announced his election as the new president, Biden has not mentioned this at all. He keeps talking about rejoining the World Health Organization. He's talking about rejoining the Paris Accords, but off of the script, I'm afraid, has fallen the JCPOA. So I think behind the scenes there's going to be a lot of negotiation going on between Washington and Tehran, and also Ursula von der Leyen in Europe. But that is quite feasible that we'll see. If I would suggest the Iranians really, could be going back towards compliance. If you can do that quite quickly, then that suddenly leaves Joe Biden looking rather silly after what he said, if he wants to go back into the JCPOA. So that is something the Israelis won't want. They'll be putting a lot of pressure on for that. I mean, that's, I think, what's going on. And also, I mean, the relations with Europe, I think, are going to be really interesting. It's an oligarchy. Ursula von der Leyen doesn't really represent anybody in Europe. She's been chosen by the elite, people like Henry Kissinger, who she sat next to at the 2016 Bilderberg conference dinner, secret dinner, which was leaked to me that she was, favoured person at the top table next to Kissinger. And these people, the oligarchy behind the scenes, the Kissinger that can't stop being the world statesman, even though he was never elected for the last 40 years, these are the people really running the show now, and we'll see them writing the script for Biden.
Okay. And, George, I saw you shaking your head there. You could wait on whatever you want to. But also, Ursula von der Leyen, she said that although divisions can be bridged, that some shifts in priorities and perceptions run much deeper than just one politician or one administration between the U.S. and the Europeans. What are some of those, shifts in priorities and perceptions that have taken place?
Well, I just want to go back to what Tony was saying. Iran can't just return to compliance. To the extent that Iran is not in compliance, that is as a result of the sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration. The Trump administration had prohibited any country from taking any of Iran's enriched nuclear fuel. So that's why it exceeded the amounts that it had, and therefore it was no longer in compliance. So in other words, the Biden administration would have to lift the sanctions first before Iran could come into compliance. And we don't know what exactly Biden means by coming into compliance, because one of the criteria that they'll mention about compliance will be the ballistic missiles. Now, strictly speaking, that was just part of the JCPOA. It wasn't any obligation upon Iran, but Biden could easily make that an issue, and I'm sure he will, that Iran needs to stop its ballistic missile program. So there's a long way to go there. But on the other issue, there's a real economic problem. I mean, this transatlantic partnership has come at the expense of the United States, because Europe, had rather enjoyed this military alliance, in return for which the Americans basically gave Europeans rather favorable trade terms. And Germany has particularly been favorably treated, because through the euro, its currency is undervalued, and therefore makes German products, rather competitive in the U.S. market. And I think that's another issue that Trump has raised. It says euro is undervalued. In other words, the old Deutschmark is undervalued. So that's an issue that isn't going to go away, particularly when American manufacturing industry is in tatters.
We only have about a minute left, Tony. Your final thoughts, please.
Well, I think what we're going to see under Biden, and I'm assuming that the legal challenges of Trump will get nowhere, although I think the most, certainly from the evidence I've seen, and we keep hearing on the BBC and CNN there is no evidence, but there is evidence, and it's been submitted in lawsuits, not to the BBC or CNN for obvious reasons. It is to do with electronic voting fraud, potentially in states like Michigan and other swing states. So we'll see where that goes. Nothing is over until the courts have finished their work. And it's not TV channels that should be choosing US presidents in a democracy. It's the courts and the voters that choose them. But we're going to see, I think, under Biden, we're going to see the European Union and the US more aligned. And that's bad for Britain. It's bad for Brexit. It means that we're going to get some of our biggest trade partners now more ganging up on the UK to try and make Brexit as painful as possible.
Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for showing up on the program. Always a pleasure to get both your perspectives on Press TV. George Zambiuli there joining us out of Budapest, and Tony Gosling there from Bristol. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.